did you get a chance to check out Ham Helsing?
I did. I did read it. And I have to say, so I was prior to reading it, like I'm not familiar at all with, I mean, obviously I know the story of Dracula and all like that, but I've actually never read Dracula or watched any of the movies or Van Helsing or anything like that. So I have like limited background knowledge. Thankfully, you don't really need much for this. I was just happy with the pun. That was more interesting to me because other than that, as I'm reading it, I'm like, is any of this like a pun? Is any of this a play on that? So, because I wasn't really sure, but I'm like, you know what? The kids reading it aren't going to know either, so it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, it totally doesn't. I love the idea that you don't need background knowledge to read it,
Yeah,
and that it plays with the idea of like, what's a good guy, what's a bad guy.
yeah,
Like everybody knows vampires are bad, but then
yeah,
this story sort of says, well, what's the vampire like as a person?
yeah,
Which is not something you usually get in the stories, but I really like it in this middle grade sort of arena when the stories kind of have that idea of
yeah,
maybe there's more than just what's on the surface and we need to kind of get to know people. So I thought that was great. I really liked it. And
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, go on.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say along those same lines, I think a lot of kids are familiar with, the not graphic novel, but the picture book, The True Story of the Three Little Pigs, because a lot of times teachers will use that for teaching perspective and stuff. So again, I thought that was a similar kind of thing. It's a pig, like it could be used in the same kind of unit. And for me, I particularly liked that just because I am trying, one of my things for next year that I really want to try is creating more of a culture of reading, because I feel like our school is really lacking that. But one of the things that drives me crazy in general is I feel like the kids' choices and what they choose to read are not always respected. Not just by parents, but also by teachers. And that
Mm-hmm.
frustrates me,
Mm-hmm.
especially the backlash against graphic novels as real books, as counting as real reading. And so I am trying to get more graphic novels for teachers to actually consider as a book. Like we even had a student that started this past year, and he started, he's deaf, has the cochlear implant, and we wear the FM system and everything. And so of course right away I'm like, El Defo, like I have to get this teacher. Come to find out it's the kid's favorite book, and the teacher was still hesitant to read it as a class book. And it's just like, it's also available, it was available as an ebook through the public library. I'm like, so you could have it up on the screen. Like, yeah, we only have one copy of it, or I got 2 copies. We only have 2 copies, but still, like, you can, even if you're just using your Elmo, like, they can still see the pictures and you read it as a class book. But like, so many people are just kind of really hesitant about the graphic novel. So I like that as another way to again add to a unit on perspective, or just
Yeah, and I love
just
the idea of using the True Story of the Three Little Pigs as a paired text. This would pair with so many things. Like it's great because it does have so many different elements you can kind of look at within it, from perspective, from what lessons are we learning, from how do we look at other people, the empathy, looking beyond the surface of people. There's so many different ways that this could be tied into so many great lessons that it's a shame when I hear people say, oh, our teachers don't really respect graphic novels. I have been very fortunate that for the most part, my teachers are on board with graphic novels. So I've been able to get those into some hands.
yeah,
But this might be a little bit on the younger side for some, like I'm in 7,
for
8,
your, yeah,
but I can absolutely see kids who would love to read this. I don't know that I could get my teachers on board with it, but
yeah.
it would be I can absolutely see the kids who would want to just dive wholeheartedly into this.
Well,
And
that's how, as far as teachers, like I do recommend a lot of times. I mean, there's really great graphic novels. I mean, I think probably the first one that really got me on board with graphic novels as far as like an adult was probably Hey Kiddo. But I really, really, as far as for my kids though, that was age appropriate for them, and was probably Whitebird, just because I love historical fiction, especially World War II era. So I really like that. And I had read Wonder and Augie and Me. And so many teachers do use Wonder still with their classes, but don't know that book. And I think now, especially with that movie, the movie coming out too, that might be another way I could get teachers on board with the graphic novel thing. But
They're
this one
making a movie out of they're making a movie out of Whitebird?
yes, yes, I saw it when I went to see what was the movie? Oh, the Judy Blume movie. Are You There, God, It's Me and Margaret. I went to see that with some librarians, and that was one of the previews, and I was very excited. So it's going to be told live action, like, not as a graphic novel, but still. So yeah, I think it's coming out this fall.
Huh, I had no idea. That's interesting.
And so yes, I thought, oh, that's another like way to, and get people in on that, or maybe get teachers in on that, or more adults, because that's another thing I want to try. I mentioned before, having like a book club for teachers, or a book club for students and teachers, or some kind of book clubs coming up in the new year.
Yeah. This is, I kind of go back and forth on whether this would be a good book to do with adults. Like if you had adults who liked graphic novels already, I think this would be a great one. I don't know that it would convince the adults who aren't so much on board, which is a shame because it is a good story. Like it does have some really good stuff to it. And being a series, if you can hook the kids into it on the first book, they're more likely to come back and see the rest of them. So I don't know. I feel like
that's the thing with like Dog Man. I have so many teachers or parents that are kind of against Dog Man, and it's like, it's so good though. It's so funny. And then I can sometimes get teachers around because of the Cat Kid Comic Club, because at least I've been able to show, hey, how you could use this as a lesson. Like there's definite lesson here. Like, okay, draw or write things you love, write things you love to do. Now make it into a story. Like there's definite story prompts in that book because it is a comic club. But I feel like Dogman, they think it's so silly, and it's just like, but it's just so funny, and it's just like, I don't know, reading is reading. Like just read. Especially this age group, like with the kids I'm with, grades 3 to 5, this is when reading starts to plummet. Like reading for fun starts to plummet, because this is when they start getting told kind of what to read, or what is a real book versus what isn't, and what counts as reading. And it's just like, it's all reading. It's all using your brain, just in different ways. And so it's, I don't know. I think my kids will like this. I bought this for myself, but I will add it to our school library and see how it goes over, and see about the other ones in the series. I think, are they up to book 3?
I think so. I only saw that it was part of a series. I didn't look too deeply into where the series went from here, but I just was so tickled by so much of this story. Like I was literally laughing out loud multiple times as I read it. And I'm not one to laugh out loud unless it's really something. But what I loved was, my wife is not a graphic novel reader at all. And she heard me laughing, and I showed her 1 or 2 panels that just had totally cracked me up. And she was like, oh, that looks really cute. Can I read that? I was like, sure can, here. So I handed off, I got it on, I borrowed it from the library on digital, but she loved it. She went through it, and like, it's not a long read. So she sat down and read through it, but she loved it. She found it so funny and so engaging. And the evil chicken.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I cannot wait to see where that goes. Just things.
No, I like that. And so I guess that's the next one, is a Frankenstein, or Frank and Chad is probably the second one. Although I like the little comic blip at the end too, with the Shazam or Shazam. Shazam. But I like that too.
The werewolf boy was fun. Like that there are talking animals, but also people, but they live in their own sort of separate worlds almost. There were so many cool little details and fun little bits. And it's just a shame that I think too many people are going to write it off because it looks silly. But I feel like I've seen this art someplace before, but I couldn't figure out where.
It's funny because I meant to go actually look him up. So Rich Moyer has his website, richmoyer.com, and I meant to look that up before last week, but then last week I knew I couldn't attend because we had our union meeting. So I'm like, I won't be going to that book club anyway. And then I totally forgot about it before today, because it does say on the back of the book that he is an award-winning animator and former syndicated cartoonist. So may have seen his work. This is like his first actual book though, but have probably seen his work somewhere else.
That makes a lot of sense. Actually,
With,
his warthog looks just like a character from a cartoon that I have seen before. So maybe that's where I have seen some of this style before. I'll have to look up and see what he did. But it was just so, there's so many clever little bits.
yeah.
And the way he's playing with sort of the tropes of the different genre, like the horror genre, particularly, and the gothic genre. Just, I think there's so many things that you could use this for, in addition to just being an enjoyable story. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff that it would lend itself to really well.
And again, along with those lines of, you know, graphic novels being real books and their value, is just the fact that some of the vocabulary in this book really can lend itself to discussion or front loading before a lesson, just because some of the words like prodigious and some of the other ones I had seen in here, that it was like, you know, a kid wouldn't necessarily know what that means. And that's one of the awesome things about graphic novels, is because of the pictures, they can use vocabulary that would really kind of a student would struggle with in a different format. But in this case, they can kind of, you know, have the context clues of the pictures and of, you know, what's going on to kind of figure it out. And so I feel like it, you know, lends it to that as well. And that is one of the things that you see in general, that, you know, vocabulary tends to be higher level in graphic novels, just because of that, because of that positive.
And there's the rat who has the thesaurus that's always throwing out big words to try and look smart. Like, what a great little bit within the story.
I remember now making a note about that, because even just the idea of a thesaurus, like, because the kids don't use an actual dictionary, thesaurus, any of those kinds of things. And so just that idea of pulling that into it, and then having, you know, whatever, a word of the day, a word of the week, or whatever, something that you're finding in the thesaurus, and, you know, and having to use different words for that same word. Like, okay, this word is taboo today, we have to use another word that means the same thing, or some kind of funny game that could go with it. Especially as a classroom teacher, I feel like that if you're using a section each day, I feel like a lot of times I'll have all these ideas, or I see something in a book and it's like, oh, it would be awesome to use it like this. But then as a librarian, only seeing them maybe once a week or every other week, it's hard to, you know, have that carryover from class to class.
Yeah, but I could totally see a copy of this getting all marked up just as a sort of a teacher copy to say, here's things that you could do with this beyond just having an enjoyable story. You know? I'd totally love to see this just given to the kids for them to enjoy, and then come back to it afterwards and say, okay, like, what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Now let's play around and see, you know, what's some of the stuff that the author's doing here. Because I think it would be a really enjoyable story with the younger grades, who would, I think a large part of your population would really get into the story itself and enjoy it. And so they would kind of take it in, as opposed to the class novel that you have to read this. And so you're like, you know, we're dissecting it as we go instead of just enjoying the story. And I feel like when you enjoy it first and then come back to it, you get a lot more out of it. But
well, that's even one of my things of trying to push graphic novels more as a class read aloud, just for the fact that one, making the teacher aware that there's so much more, but then it is using it, taking it further than just pictures, or just, you know, taking it further and having those discussions, because there's so many great graphic novels that you can have those same kind of discussions that you can with a novel. You know, that they can get really, really in depth, and really can be very deep in terms of some of the I'm trying to even think of some of the, like, the graphic novels that, well, besides the graphic biographies and memoirs and things like that, there's just some really, really good graphic novels that struggle with, like, you know, friendships and emotions and all of that kind of stuff that kids definitely struggle with. and I think more so now than I don't know, ever before, probably.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, there's an argument that occurred to me as we were talking this through, that teachers should really like graphic novels because they're quick. because you
yeah.
don't have to spend 3 weeks reading, for, 10 pages a day or whatever it is. You can give this to kids, they'll be done with it in a week, and then you can dig into it, and save so much class time for the actual discussion and analysis rather than just the reading, and giving them the chance to read it first before they have to try and dig through it. Because I don't know how your teachers do it in your school, but I know in my school, it tends to be like we're reading it aloud and we're analyzing it as we go rather than being able to focus on what's the story is. And so I think that's a really difficult way for kids to read and analyze. They're not capturing what the story is really about because they're looking at it for how the parts fit together rather than what the whole picture is. So graphic novels, man, they're the solution to everything.
Well, they're really good for a more in-depth kind of inquiry based reading system, because they are something that a student really could read in a day or so by themselves. Then they pair up and they read together, or are sharing together, and then it moves to a bigger group, and you could work on it each day, but everyone's already read it and has that background. Because like you said, at our school, it typically is that a teacher is reading a small bit each day, and they're kind of doing as they go. And so just to understand that, like, hey, you could really get through this, and also I think it's just a great way to, hey, if they see a teacher is reading a graphic novel, or a teacher is pushing that as a valid source of reading, it's also just really beneficial, because we have a lot of students, come into third grade and they can't read. We're talking like kids at level A, B, like not reading at all.
Wow.
And so it is really low levels for some of our kids coming in. And then when they're building up those skills of reading, and especially like when you have a kid who's 8 or 9, but their reading level is going to be of like a preschool level or a kindergarten, there's not a lot of books for them. There's not that high-low. And so I feel like this is a good combination. A graphic novel is a good combination where they get those pictures and they get that. But again, like talk about the big vocabulary words, and just because it's got pictures doesn't mean it's an easy read. But also because it does tend to be quicker, there's that excitement of like, oh my gosh, I read a book in like 2 days. I read a book, and like I remember after I think it was winter break one year, I had read like, I guess 6 books over the break. And some were graphic novels, but they were all middle grade books. And I put it together as a digital book tasting, because this is during COVID. So it was like a digital book tasting I shared with kids. And I made sure I read books from different genres and different types. So I had some picture books on there. I had some of those graphic novels. And so anyway, when I said something about reading 6 books or something over the break, there was a educational assistant that was on Zoom with me, and she's like, oh my gosh, 6 books. And then like when she saw the books, oh, kid books. And it's just like, they're still middle grade books. They're still, that's actually one of the things, the pushback we're getting now, is that some of these middle grade books are way too long for the kids that, TikTok and YouTube. You can't go and have a 300 page book for these kids. Like that's not their attention level anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I think this particular graphic novel is great in that it's very simplified. Like there's only so many panels on a page. There's a lot of full page spreads. Like you're not trying to get 9 panels on a page and trying to figure out, having to read all of that. So it's, even within a graphic novel, I feel like it's a nice, accessible sort of a format for the kids.
No, that is a really good point, because that is one of the reasons why I initially struggled with graphic novels, is because I am a very fast reader, and graphic novels, I felt like they slowed me down. And it's like, this is like so much more work to have to go and have it broken up. And again, it's like I said earlier, though, that it's just working the brain in a different way. For me, I find it easier to read a regular novel, but for someone who is struggling with either just tracking issues or just following along in general because it's just too many words.
Mhm.
That's really nice. But then for someone who like me who prefers a novel, it makes me stop and think. It makes me have to take in the context of the pictures and consider all these other little details that normally I just skip right over because I already got the image in my head. Like I don't need that.
Mhm.
And so it is really interesting. It's just like every now and then when I throw in like a manga or something, I read that and oh my God, the way that taxes my brain to have to read backwards in the opposite direction and follow the panels. Like, so I do think this is a nice kind of, I don't want to say beginner but thing, but like you said, friendly in terms of following the panels. It's
Mhm.
not some can be really tricky or can be really busy. Um, so this is nice.
Yeah, and they're not always laid out in the panels aren't always laid out in a format that sort of, or an order that makes sense. Like sometimes you got to go from here to here to here
Yeah.
rather than just reading across and down, so this is really very visually clear, it's
Yeah.
very easy for your eye to follow what goes where and what's going on. And you're also, when you're talking about how kids may have difficulty with just physically tracking, visually tracking the text, there's also that excellent component of graphic novels that like you can see which character is saying what thing. You don't have to try and figure out, read through half of a sentence before you get to the attribution of who's saying the dialogue, so many ways that this is more friendly for our students.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And actually, I love that you said that because that's one of my things when like why I still kind of pushed and I still had to go and spend part of my budget to get the Elephant and Piggy books because we didn't have them at our school for grades 3 through 5 because our school used to be K through 5. And when they split the schools, they sent all of that stuff, the pigeon books, Elephant and Piggy, all like what they consider lower books to the K through 2 school. But of course, the third graders still love them, even the fourth graders, fifth graders. But I do think they're really good for those kids. And same thing with graphic novels that it's another way to help with that expression when they're learning to read
Mhm.
because so many times you're learning to read, you're very monotone in how they're saying it. And so it's nice when you are seeing the character actually saying and see who's saying it and it's like look at their face, how do you think they said it, like how do you think this chicken is saying, they're not just like ah like and so it's just another way to add expression to reading, which even if you have an 8-year-old who is a proficient reader, that doesn't mean that they're an expressive reader.
Yeah,
And so I feel like it's still worthwhile even for the kids who are above that reading level.
absolutely. And another thing that occurred to me earlier, I think so many people write off graphic novels like this because they're goofy or they're silly. But I think that's missing a huge learning opportunity because the wordplay and the puns and the visual jokes that are here, yes, they're silly. Yes, they're funny. Yes, they're goofy. But the structure or the level of difficulty that it takes to pull that off and being able to look at that with the students and say, okay, this is goofy and this is funny, but like, how is that being
Yeah.
presented and how can we use that ourselves when we're doing our own writing? How do we bring our own voice to the writing in ways that can replicate this? So there's, I don't know, it's just such a shame that so many people don't see the value in them because there's so many ways these can support learning in so many different formats, in so many genres, and so many different, like, for learners and all the different learning styles. This is hitting on so many of them. But preaching to the
Well,
choir, no.
yes, yeah, that is where it's difficult. I feel like thankfully I think a lot of people are coming around to it, especially like my teachers that do have younger kids. I think they're starting to see the value. The ones that have been more pushing against it. Actually, the one that I had in particular that was really pushing against it, she's moving to the middle school next year. So we won't have that issue so much because the kids would always come and beg me, like, can you come and talk to her because she won't let us read that, like she won't let us count that for our reading. And it's just like, I've tried, like, and I even have the posters and signs up in the library from Jarrett Lerner about like, how important graphic novels are and the vocabulary, increased vocabulary levels in graphic novels and just all this stuff. But it's just like, especially if I show a teacher any kind of manga, because most teachers aren't familiar with it. Like that blows their mind. But then of course you have the teachers that worry, well, this isn't going to help them learn to read because now it's backwards and now it's, and it's just like, it's a
just
puzzle. It's a challenge
yeah,
for your brain. Anything is helping.
yeah. It's just decoding. I mean, it's a different kind of decoding. There
Yeah.
was a great post on Twitter today, somebody, and I'll have to see if I can find it, but it was basically reading happens in the brain.
Oh, I saw that.
I
Yes.
loved it. And then it was, whether that happened, whether the input comes from your eyes or your hands or, whatever,
Yep.
the reading happens in your brain. So that's, that's it. Like we got to get past all these problems with format and just say, look,
Yeah.
we're trying to teach the kids to decode stuff. However they take it in best, that's what we got to try and help them with. So
Yeah, well, especially I feel like in this day and age where you don't even know, like the student you are teaching right now, you are not, yes, I mean, obviously you want them to be prepared for what they're doing right now and for next year, but you're really preparing them for, 10, 20 years from now. And we don't know what that's going to be like. I mean, imagine even when I was in school, they definitely did not know they were preparing us for the internet or any of that kind of stuff. There was no thought that that was going to be anything. And so just the idea of what are you doing today that's preparing for them for that tomorrow? And so it does have to be that it's coming from all different sources and decoding in so many different ways, and just considering all different forms of information and formats of things, because we really don't know what that future is going to be. And I look at it even now, like sometimes I see the negative in it. Like I'm teaching pre-K right now for the summer, and even just calendar, like I don't know, I mean, it's probably been a very long time maybe since you've been around a preschool, but like back in the day when I used to teach preschool, you had the calendar up on the wall and the kids had the little squares and you go and put the numbers up and you do all that and you do the weather, and it was all like there just on a wall, and now of course it's on a device, it's on a screen, and they go and they do the calendar and stuff, and everything's a video. It's not just a song playing on a CD somewhere, or heaven forbid a cassette. It is it's a YouTube video. And so even like, I'm like, no wonder, because I sometimes would get like really annoyed when I've got my kids, my grades 3 through 5, and they can't seem to sit for a story. All I'm doing is reading a story, which mind you, I do make as a big screen behind me. So the screen is there. They can see it big. It's not like they can't see the pictures, but sometimes they can't even sit for it. And I'm like, preschoolers can sit for this. But now I realize today's preschoolers can't. Like they're used to everything being a video and everything being these short little bursts. And that's that. Like they rarely do watch a movie or something long. And so it's crazy.
They also seem to get very focused on sort of like the top level of whatever it is, like they see the main stuff, but they miss a lot of the background stuff.
Yeah.
And again, graphic novel, like the artist has put in details for a reason. Like why are the details the way they are?
Yes.
Like, if you don't notice that on page 146, that there's a Shazam comic.
Oh yes, I saw that.
Right? It doesn't, then you make the connection between, oh, that's there. And the end of the story also has some fun stuff.
Yes, had that little thing.
Yeah.
Although I have different page numbers than you. But I know exactly the part you were talking about because I remember seeing it in the story because I just watched the second Shazam movie. I just watched it last week. And so I noticed it.
It's kind of fun that they happen to have that movie come out just now because it ties in so nicely with this. Like I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but that was a fun little connection. But like that page has right above it is the video game machine. You can kind of huck your ball, and you could talk about, well, what do you think that video game would be like, and get the kids conjecturing, guessing. And then there's other weird stuff in the cabinet with the Shazam and the sword, like why is there a cucumber or a pickle? What's that ring about? So there's so many little bits that are here if you were digging into it with the kids a little bit to try and get them to think about. Or like a couple of pages before that, 2 pages before that, there's a shot with the ninja pig lady in the forest, and she's a spider, and it's a very creepy sort of vibe to where she's at. And you could kind of talk about, well, what are the details of this picture that are sort of adding to the atmosphere of this story, you know, or this image? How is this author bringing across these feelings or these emotions that we're picking up just from looking at this one panel, you know?
Yeah.
And I could see that turning into a lesson on, okay, so now that we've talked about how we see it in this visual, how do we bring that into, if we were writing it, like what would be the details we could bring in to bring atmosphere to our story, you know? So many things you can do.
No, that's where, again, it gets, I don't want to say overwhelming, almost like I feel like missed opportunity, that, like, you know, when you're only seeing kids for a short time as a librarian, like there's so much that you could go so in depth with things. And it's like, but you just never get the chance to take it that far, to take it there, because of, you know, the way your schedule is, or that you do a 40-minute class, but 10 or 15 or even 20 minutes of it needs to be book checkout. And, you know, and it's just all these things that you don't have time for. And it's like, there's so much, and not to mention even just the art of it all. I mean, kids are so, at least in my school, they're really, really into art. They're very into drawing. I think it's just the fact of, you know, that they have all these resources at their fingertips in terms of TikTok and YouTube videos and stuff like that, just showing you how to easily draw something. Like, I was always horrible at drawing, but again, you had to go find a book, or you had to go to an art class to actually learn. You didn't just see a video of someone showing you how to do it. But they're also into art, and I feel like there's so many ways to bring graphic novels into that. And even just the idea of, I'm not sure about in this book. In this book, it seems like Rich Moyer did the coloring as well. But like, I always find it so interesting to point out a graphic novel to the kids and then show the page where it's like giving thanks, or it's mentioning like the colorist. Like, coloring is a job. Like, you know, just that idea that you were picking colors for the book and you were coloring in someone else's picture, like that's a job. And that's one of my big things I especially love about graphic novels. Also goes with picture books as well, but I feel like even more so with graphic novels, that idea of collaboration, because there are usually so many people involved in a graphic novel, a bit more so than even a picture book, but definitely more so than a traditional novel.
Oh, definitely. Because you've got the scripter who might come up with the story, but then when the artist starts to render it, a lot of times the script changes because of the way the artist is visualizing it. And so there's absolutely collaboration between the two to get the story to its final form.
Well, and I think that is the thing is with the graphic novel, is I feel like they do work together more. So like, a friend of mine is a picture book author, has never met her illustrator, has no idea. And when she sold it, because that's just how it usually is, the publisher buys the book. So they buy the book idea, they buy the words and stuff like that. Then they choose the illustrator. And then you've got to just kind of hope that they bring to life what you had. Like, I remember she loved the illustrations for her book, but one of the reviews she got said something about like it not being multicultural enough, and they specifically referenced this page where it was the Taj Mahal, and the only picture was of a white person taking pictures, because it was a tourist, and like, oh, there was a missed opportunity. But it's like, but she doesn't draw the picture, she didn't choose that. And so it actually was an illustrator of color that did the illustrations. But like, and that was one thing where, you know, it's like you're handing off your baby, you know, that you don't get that. But I feel like, and I could be completely wrong, because obviously I'm not a graphic novelist, but it seems like when I've either seen interviews or read stuff, it seems like they work more together, because I'll talk about the other person bringing it to life and then them adding things, or like you said, changing stuff because of how the panels go, or, oh, I didn't even think, you know, of that. And so I do think it's a great way to make writing for students not just a solo effort. Like, this can be a team effort. This can be almost like a, you know, like a screenwriter's kind of, you know, room that you're all working together to make something, or at the very least in group effort.
And I think that's an interesting kind of tie in too, that thinking about it as screenwriting, because when you write a script for a movie, it then gets turned into storyboards, which are basically a graphic novel. It's like, you got to imagine, what is this going to look like when people actually see it versus what's in your head? So making that transition, having a team to work on that and make it come to life, like you said, collaboration, but also a really interesting way to sort of tie together writing and visual medium, and kind of how these are kind of fluid lines that we kind of arbitrarily draw between these different formats sometimes.
Yeah.
Coming back to this specific story, I also was just thinking about how when the werewolf turns back into a little kid, and I bet that most readers, when they read that, are going to absolutely know 100% like, oh, he's a werewolf. But that's knowledge that they're coming to the story with that's not actually explained really in the story.
Yeah.
So like, there's a great discussion to be had there about what are things that we are expected to know when we're reading this story, when we're reading other stories, that aren't necessarily explained. Like, they're just expected that we're going to have this background knowledge. And why is background knowledge so important when we're reading stories? You know, because I know that's become a real focus in reading, about the importance of making sure kids have the right background knowledge to comprehend what they're reading. And so much of what we get comes from our popular culture, that we just roll into stories with a preloaded sort of index of things. And so you could talk about, like, what are the things in this story that you knew, and what are the things that were new, and what in other stories are things you knew or things that you didn't know. So like, there's lots of ways to eventually tie this in, or potentially tie this in with so many other pieces of literature, whether they're graphic novels or whether they're text or prose. Like, there's just, man, I'm not teaching ELA right now, but there's so many things I'm thinking about that you could do with this.
You have middle school and high school, right?
Yeah, I'm mostly middle school, but I deal with the high school kids sometimes too. There's even the telegram early, like maybe about the third of the way through, where the pigeon shows up with the telegram, and at the end it says full stop. And like, how many kids are going to understand what that's supposed to be? You know, like, there's an opportunity there to kind of dig into, oh, okay, let's spin this off and talk about technology and telegraphs and telephones and how that all came about. And I think that also speaks to, when's the time period that this is taking place in? Like, there's not really a specific, it's not given a specific time period. How do we figure it out? What do we think? What are some clues? What are some contextual clues that we might use to try and figure it out? Boy, I'm just having fun peeling through this now and just thinking about, oh yeah, you could do that. You could do this other thing.
I often wondered, I'm trying to remember, I started it and then I had moved on to something else because we had the union meeting. So then I just came back to it because I was trying to remember all the little bacon. Was there a reference to the bacon, or what was their thing? Because I'm like, what's the deal with all the bacon and the pigs?
Yeah, at some point he says that they're his undead minions.
Oh yes, here it is. Here it is. He's controlling the undead. So yes, I see it.
Which
all
is
little strips of bacon.
Again, like, such a clever joke, but you could dig into that and talk about, okay, why does this make sense within the context of the story?
Oh my God, I feel like I actually missed this section in chapter 8. Because even where he says about the watch it, that bacon grease burns, but it does smell good. It's like, but yeah, how many, I think some kids automatically get the joke of, wait a minute, he's a pig. But I'm curious as to who wouldn't,
And hey, pigs are omnivorous and willing to be carnivorous.
Yes.
So. Just so much. And like, even looking at those couple of panels from like the chapter 8 page and then the next page, and looking at the backgrounds and sort of how what the details are that are brought in, or what kind of background is being used. Like, Moyer is kind of playing around with what is the background that he's giving us for these different actions and scenes and sets.
Yeah.
And there's little bits of detail there that like might make us see the story in slightly different ways depending on what parts we're noticing,
You know, I really liked the use of the backgrounds, the color
Lot of
just really kind of set the tone of different, you know, different parts, like you talked about before, about being dark or being, you know, like I don't know, I just felt like it was a really really interesting book from so many different angles. And so yeah, so I am curious to see how it goes over with students, and you know, whether it becomes one of those popular, you know, dogman ones. Like I did get that book, The Two-Headed Chicken. Now I just got it towards the end of the year, but it hadn't taken off yet. And like, you know, like, and I'm curious, but it is another funny one that's kind of along the lines of Dogman-esque kind of thing, where it is kind of these just all these little jokes that again you have to have either some kind of background knowledge, or in this case, like a student's not going to know Ham Helsing, not going to know necessarily that it's what that even is a reference to. Will they get the pun because of the pig and ham? Will they that totally go over their head? You know, I
Mhm.
do think it's one of those ones that it would be interesting to see if a kid took that home and it's sitting somewhere, if a parent's like thinking that's funny or is saying that. Because I do feel like some of these things are things that they might not pick up on, but are just like so funny later.
I could imagine this being such a great first time read, like having the teacher and the class reading it together for the first time, and the kids seeing how the teacher reacts to stuff,
Yeah,
because the teachers are going to catch stuff the kids are not going to catch. And they're going to be like laughing. They're going to be like, what's funny? But like, if
yeah,
the kids were engaged with the teacher enough to like ask questions about like, hey, why are you
yeah.
laughing at that? What's going on there? There could be some really great learning moments there for, I think, both sides of the equation, you know?
Yeah.
Hmm. And the more I'm definitely going to need to get a copy of this for the library, because I can absolutely see some of my readers really getting into this. And now I want to read the other books.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check them out from our local library and see. I'm really trying to be good, although I am putting together orders right now, but I'm trying to be good about not spending my own money so much this year because I'm
Yep.
horrible about that. So I'm gonna try to be good with that. But this one I bought because this is different. I was reading it for myself first, but I will add it to the library because I'm willing to share. But I guess as I'm putting together orders, yeah, I'll have to see if I want to throw in the other ones initially, or if I want to wait and see where this one goes, and then that will then get build the excitement for another one
Mm-hmm.
first, you know. Although I
Yeah.
do sometimes think that they're more willing to pick up a book when they see it is a series. It's like, oh, I got to read the first one, like, you know.
Some kids totally want it to be a series. Other kids are going to be scared off by a series because, oh, there's more to read. But I feel like this kind of hits a nice sweet spot that you could absolutely just read one piece of it. And I'd be willing to bet,
You can read the
not
next
having read
one.
the future ones, but I'm willing to bet you could probably kind of pick them up and just roll with it without
Yeah.
necessarily having too much background information.
Oh, that's like me when the kid brings up just any random Harry Potter book. And it's like, but they've never read any of them before. It's like, no, this is one you read in order. You have to
Yeah.
read in order. I'm sorry. I'm not a stickler about that for everything. But then it is hard because you know you have 600 kids in the school and we have like 4 copies of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And it takes them forever to read it. Um,
Yeah.
so that is one that I'm like, where are the Harry Potter graphic novels? Like,
I,
where are those? Because
I think
that's what
there's now a set out.
there
I
is
think,
a set, because that's what we need. I have the illustrated ones, and I have the Mina Lima, like beautiful pop-up ones, but not graphic novels. They used to
oh
have, when
yeah.
my kids were younger, they had Harry Potty, and it was a graphic novel, yes, like parody of Harry Potter. And but otherwise I
No, it's the
had
illustrated edition I'm thinking of. I
yeah,
was
like I
wrong.
feel like they need to have a graphic novel because that would be much quicker and easier for kids to read. But also I just feel like they're so many of them are seeing the movies now before they've ever read the book. And I feel like I'm a purist when it comes to that. Like, you know, you read the book first.
The graphic
So
novels, I mean, you'd have to turn it into like each novel would end up with how many volumes of graphic novel if they were going to
yeah,
try and like really bring it over,
really,
you know?
yeah, really put it in there. But I
But
think it would be so good.
they've got the TV show now that they're
Yeah,
rebooting the whole thing. So who knows? Maybe that'll be in the future. But
there's got to be somebody working on it. Like, how is it not a thing yet?
yeah.
Everything's coming out as a graphic novel now, which is one of the ways I do try to get teachers more on board. Because when they see, if you got a teacher that always reads every year reads The Witches or whatever, and it's like it's a graphic novel, or any of these other ones that have been just either classics or just ones that are traditional classroom reads, and then to see it as a graphic novel
Mhm.
is really nice. Like I can't even tell you how many copies I have, not copies, versions of Anne of Green Gables I have, but I have at least 3 different versions of graphic novels of Anne of Green Gables. Um, but it's just so perfect because they just read, they can go through them so much quicker
Mhm.
than the other books.
Yeah.
And I do feel like get more out of them because they actually read them.
And not for nothing, but you can give like I've got an adaptation of one of the Jane Austen novels. I can't remember which one, and it's like super thin. It's
Yeah.
like maybe it's 50 pages. So a kid's going to blow through that, and they're not going to get the same stories if they read the whole
Oh yeah.
text. But they've got the basics of it, and for the kids that it grabs, they're going to then want to explore the text
Yeah.
more. So to me, it just makes sense. But I don't know. Man, I'm surprised that the two of us were able to have 45 minutes of
Oh
conversation about the graphic
yeah.
novel, but this was great.
kind of went off in graphic novels in general, but there is I don't know, just so much that can be done with them. And I feel as myself as a kind of latecomer to graphic novels, it's just really nice to see all these options out there, and just these, and have all these ideas of ways they can be used. Because even 10 years ago, I just I didn't care about graphic novels.
Yeah.
It really wasn't until I became a school librarian that I'm like, oh, let me read some of these because like kids are really into them. And then I still remember, like I said, it was Whitebird. But then over that my first winter break, I read that Cat Kid Comic Club. I think it was Perspectives. I can't remember which one, or On Purpose. And I was just laughing my ass off. Like it was just so funny. I don't know if you've ever read Cat Kid Comic Club and Chubbs McSpiderbutt. And so, oh my God, I was cracking up.
I bought the book because of Chubbs McSpiderbutt. Like that was, I saw that. I saw Dave Pilkey talking about it. And I was like, I need this
Yeah.
book just for that one little section. And the rest of it was so good, but so funny. So great.
Yeah, it's just so funny. And again, it's one of those things where just the visual art of it and just the different styles, that a graphic novel doesn't even have to be drawing. It doesn't have, there's just so many ways that you can make a book, that you can make a story. It doesn't have to be this traditional, you know, just
Hmm.
writing sentences over and over.
Yeah.
And so anyway, well, it was great talking with you
Yes.
about this.
You too. I'm going to stop the recording here.